Hey everybody, welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Dennis Fields, and today we're talking all kinds of tips and tricks that you can do with your FerMonster plastic fermenter. I bought this for a specific reason because I can do several different things that I can't do with my normal fermenter. But first, I need you all to hit that like and subscribe button, grab yourself a beer, and then we're gonna get after it. Also, if you find these videos helpful and you want to buy me a beer to say thanks and support the channel, you can do so by hitting this button right up here in the corner, or also with the link in the video description below that says buy me a beer. Cheers. All right, so let's address the elephant in the room. You've all heard me say how much I love these big mouth glass bubblers, and I would not trade these things in for the world, and I'm still gonna use them all the time. But there's a few things I can't do in this, which is the reason why I bought one of these FerMonster 7-gallon plastic fermenters. First is the size, and you can totally tell the difference between these two, right? This is 6.5 gallon, this is 7 gallons. Look at how much taller it is. And this one has some markings on the side. So 5 gallons would come up to right about here, 5.5, which is about my normal fermenter volume that I brew at. And then you have 6, and then you have a whole bunch of headspace up here. When I fit 5.5 gallons into this, although there's a gallon left, it comes way up towards the top, and it doesn't give me a lot of headspace. So I often need a blow-off tube with one of these for real aggressive fermentation, and it's pretty hard to do the first tip and trick in this one that I'm gonna show you in just a second. Before we get into the 3 tips and tricks I'm going to show you, let's talk a little bit about the FerMonster itself, what it comes with, what you get, what it looks like, and the benefits about it. First things first that we want to address is right away it comes with a lid with a hole in it, just like this one here. It comes with the gasket that seats the lid inside and seals the lid on top of the fermenter, and it comes with the fermenter itself, which is fairly light, and that's one thing I do like about this one, and it's pretty tall. Another thing I like about it is that it's clear. I like to see the activity going on just like in my glass fermenters, and this one allows me to do that. But one of the bigger benefits, besides using some other type of fermenter that might be tall like this one, is that I can still get my hand inside of here and actually clean everything out, or even get a bigger brush, where you can't do that with the smaller necked glass or even plastic fermenters that people would use, say like a water jug. One thing that it does not come with is a bung, right? And so this hole is fairly large. This is a number 10 style bung, and you can put any type of airlock in the hole that comes on top of the bung. And I'll have, again, all of this stuff linked in the video description below. They also make an opener that gets around the lid and helps you open it if you seal it really, really good. I use a little bit of keg lube actually to seal underneath here. It actually helps you get the lid back off too, because it'll give it a little lubricant. But some people have a difficulty getting this thing off, so they do make like this wrench thing, and I'll put that again in the link description if that's something that you have a hard time doing, is getting these things off. Number 1. Tip number 1 is all about dry hopping. I make a lot of IPAs, pale ales, hazy IPAs, those type of things, where I'm going to dry hop my beer. And sometimes that's on day 1, sometimes that's on day 7, sometimes somewhere in between, right? But I don't necessarily want to have to open up this fermenter in order to dry hop. And if you've watched some of my last videos, I do that sometimes using these kind of sous vide magnets, right? Shout out to CH for Homebrew for Life for having that on one of his previous videos. That's where I picked up that little tip. But what these allow you to do is put your hops inside of this vessel. And in my previous fermenters, I didn't have enough headspace in order to have a vigorous fermentation without those hops. I kind of getting soaked in that, either the krausen that's up on the top, or just eventually getting into the beer itself anyway. So I really want those things sitting up into the CO2 in the headspace, waiting to be dropped in there. So I take a 1-gallon paint strainer bag like this one, I soak it in some sanitizer, I let it air dry a little bit, and then I put my dry hops right in here. So for today's case, I'm gonna be using these hops, but I'm not gonna be brewing, so I'm just gonna put this bag in there to kind of simulate hops inside of this bag. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna drop in our hops, and then we're gonna take one of these magnets, or sometimes 2 if you need to. I have 4 of them. You can go ahead and put one of these right inside of the bag too, right? Then I go ahead and I tie this thing shut. Today I'm just gonna very loosely tie it so I can get it out, but you can tie this thing in a tight knot, and this will allow the oils from these hops to come out, but it'll then be easy to pull the bag before you go and rack it or get them out later. Once you got your hops already in here, you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna take your magnet up towards the top of the bag here, right? It's sort of kind of in the middle. And then you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna start rolling it in there with the magnet, and you're gonna kind of roll it down to the hops. right? And I get it as close as I can to those hops. In this case, there's a bag in there, so it's a little bit different. And then I take my other magnet, you reach inside this thing, and then you attach it inside of your fermenter. So these hops are gonna stay up inside of the headspace of this beer. Our 5.5 gallon mark is probably right around here somewhere. So even with a vigorous fermentation and a lot of headspace getting eaten up by Krausen, this is still gonna be up and outside of that, where it would not have been a lot of times for my glass big mouth bubbler. So then once fermentation either completes or I want to dry hop in the middle of high Krausen for a hazy IPA, for instance, I'm going to go ahead and pull these hops. And the only way to do that is just to take this magnet off and it falls down inside of the fermenter, right? One thing I will note, if you do use a tilt hydrometer, that thing is magnetic too, and sometimes my tilt has been affected by grabbing hold as it falls into the beer, but in most cases that hasn't really affected it. So one thing, if you do use a tilt hydrometer, is you can actually take this magnet and slide it down inside of the fermenter very slowly like this, and it will actually pull those hops down inside of the beer. And so you can go ahead and just drag this thing down. It sometimes helps you have more than one magnet, but in this case, this would pull this down inside of the beer, and either you can let it go then, or just keep it affixed to the side. And so sometimes I'll do that because the tilt hydrometer will kind of keep away from it if it's towards the bottom and the tilt is kind of floating up towards the top. So I'll pull this thing all the way down towards the bottom, trying not to get into the yeast too much, but then it will let those oils and stuff kind of soak out of the bag themselves. And so that's another option for you if you use a tilt hydrometer.
Number 2.
The second tip I want to show you guys is how to add a spigot to one of these. So I do not have a spigot on my glass big mouth bubblers. They do come with those. So you can buy a big mouth bubbler, even a glass one with a spigot. I don't have them on mine. I've opted to not have those, but that means I need to use a racking cane of some sort in order to transfer the beer out of there. So one of the things that I like to do is use a hose, and to make it a little easier, having a spigot on one of these things is a bonus. It's kind of hard to see when you're just looking at it, but it has a flat area to add a spigot right here. So that'll help because this area of the fermenter is not curved, and so it should give it a better seal. But it does not come on there, and so you'll have to pick one up. And I'll just so happen to have the link for those right in the video description as well. And so you can go ahead and pick these things out. Super, super cheap. Plastic one. You might even have one from an old bucket, but it's just gonna look like this. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add that thing to this FerMonster right now. All right, these spigots, they're gonna come with the spigot itself, which has the valve that turns it on and off, right? Or open and closed. And then it comes with the nut for the back that goes on the inside, and it comes with 2 silicone O-rings like this. One will go on the outside and one will go on the inside of the fermenter. The whole diameter is going to be 1 inch, and so there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You can use a spade bit very slowly like this one that will start a little hole. As long as you're going nice and slow, this one's meant for wood, but you can use it. It would give you that 1 inch width diameter. You can also use a hole drilling tool like this one. This one comes with I prefer the one that has the kind of drill bit in the middle that will hold it in place so it's not sliding all over the place when you're trying to drill your hole. That one also has a 1 inch option for it as well. Or if you don't have either one of those, you can drill kind of as big a hole as you can with a regular drill bit. This one's like a 1/2 inch, and then you can kind of carefully go around it with a scissors or even like a razor blade like this one, but just be very careful so you don't get larger than that 1 inch hole, because you will be able to escape beer and air and other things outside of this, and you'll basically ruin your fermenter. And so be very careful if you're going with just kind of slowly doing it with a box cutting knife. That would be my last resort. I'm gonna be using this one, and we're gonna be getting started right away. So I'm gonna start by going really, really slow, just so we can make sure that we're digging in the right spot, and increase speed only if I need to. And then that's all there is to it. The edges of this will be a little bit rough, so I'm gonna go ahead and just very lightly hit this with some light sandpaper just to take the little edges off here so it sits really nice when we go ahead and screw on the spigot. All right, now that that's done, we're gonna go ahead and take one of our O-rings. We're gonna put that on. There's kind of a concave edge to it, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that skinnier side towards the spigot itself and the larger side towards the bucket. So it'll give it a little bit more surface area. towards the fermenter. And then I'm going to do the same thing once I put this thing inside. I'm going to take this larger side and I'm going to put it towards the spigot. So the two larger sides will sandwich in between the fermenter here. All right, and there we got it. I was barely able to get my hand all the way inside of the top, so you may need to borrow somebody that has a smaller arm if you need to reach all the way down in here. But I was able to get that tightened up. Now we just need to check it for leaks and we're ready to go. Now when it comes to transferring here, I'll just be able to slip a hose onto this, go right into my keg or bottles, and I'll be able to bottle or keg directly from this fermenter.
Number 3.
So speaking of transferring, that's going to bring us into tip number 3, transferring under pressure. And so in this case, we talk a lot on this channel about oxidation, specifically about hazy IPAs and trying to limit the amount of oxygen exposure as you're transferring from your fermenter into your keg. So in this case, this is going to allow us to do that with about 2 pounds of pressure inside of here. This vessel is not rated for serving pressure necessarily, or even up to 3 pounds PSI if you're trying to pressure carb or anything like that, but it will hold enough pressure in order to put a couple of PSI to push out the beer from inside of the vessel out of the spigot down into your keg, or you could do it with a dip tube. But the only way to do that is to have a different lid and some other equipment. So to do that, you'll need a regular lid like this that does not have the hole in the middle. It also does not come necessarily, and you'll have to read the description, but necessarily with the gasket on the inside. So you'll need to buy another one of those and just fit that in carefully all the way around. Sometimes when you squeeze it in at first, it kind of looks like it has a little bubble on one side, but if you work it down with your fingers, it'll snap all the way in, all the way around. And then again, when you are using it and screwing it down on the lid, go ahead and use a little bit of that keg lube to give it a good seal, but also allow you to help get it off of there later on. The other thing you're going to need is some quick connect posts for your ball lock keg connections, or pin lock keg, depending on which one you use. But I use ball lock, so I'm using a gas connection that is threaded in order to drill a hole in the cap and apply this to the top. That'll allow me to push some gas into this, or even put on a fixture and put an airlock on here, but that's for a different video. And go ahead and put this thing on for 2 pounds of pressure, and it will actually fill the headspace then with CO2 coming from my CO2 tank, and then push the beer out, and 0 oxygen will touch this going in. And I'll show that in a future video just so you all can see how that works. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and install these. You can alternatively, if you don't wanna put a spigot on it, you can also have a gas and a liquid post, and you could put one on each side and have a dip tube that comes down and pulls the beer out using the exact same method. So if you don't want to use the spigot route and you want to use a liquid post, you can also do that as well. But this threaded portion here is what we're going to want to measure in order to drill our hole into the cap. And so in this case, I think it's about a 1/2 inch or so, but I'm just going to kind of line it up and measure. You don't want to go too big, but you want to be big enough where you can barely kind of thread it on there. And again, just to clean up the hole a little bit, stick it in and rotate it a little bit on this side. Since it's a little snug yet still, I'm gonna take this bit, since I don't have one that's just a little bit bigger right on me right now, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of tilt a little tiny bit in each direction. This, as I'm turning it, just tilt it a little bit, try to widen out that hole just a little bit so we can get that threading going. But you don't wanna do it too much so it's oblong, but let's see if we can get that threading going now. There we go. So once the threading starts, it should pull right through the top of the lid, and that way we can go ahead and snug that thing down. All right, so once you get this thing threaded through here, the kit comes with 2 O-rings. So you'll put that second O-ring on the outside here. Be sure not to tighten the inside one too much. You can kind of pancake out these O-rings, and then if you have them too tight, you could have a bad seal and let some air or CO2 out. And so I'm gonna go ahead and start screwing this on, and we're gonna get them hand tight, and then just a little bit past hand tight, we'll snug them down with a wrench, and then we're gonna test it for leaks. All right, we hit this thing with a few pounds of PSI, and we're gonna go ahead and test it by using some sanitizer and spray it on the lid here. and you'll see some bubbles kind of coming up if you need to tighten it back down again. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and once you can tighten it from both sides where you don't see any bubbles, then you have a nice good seal on the top. If you aren't really concerned because you're only going to be using this for transfers, you don't have to get it kind of airtight, because once you're going to put it on a couple pounds of pressure, it'll still push out the beer and won't let any oxygen in. It's just not holding, 10 psi or anything like that. So go ahead and test around and make sure you use a little bit of keg lube and things like that to get those seals so they don't keep leaking. And once that's done, you should be good to go. All right, guys, those are 3 tips you have for the FerMonster to make your brewing life a little bit easier and hopefully a little bit better. If you found this helpful, consider buying me a beer to help the channel. Always hitting that like and subscribe button does that as well. As always, all of this stuff will be in the video description below. Happy to answer any questions in the comments. Go ahead and leave me a comment here. With that, happy brewing and cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. A way you can support the channel is just by buying me a beer. There's a button right there on the screen, and there's a link in the video description below. You can also check out the merchandise in our store, and you can hit the video on the screen right now. You know you want to.